Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants that eternal kiss. Yeah, everyone's saying there's more than this. Everyone wants to follow their own bliss. Talking about one love, one blood, one life in everyone. One life, give each other. We are sisters and brothers. We sing Om.
On the Expansion Zone, we examine life and our quest to understand who and what we are and of the vastness of human potentials. We explore the making of our world from quantum physics to parapsychology, health, sociology, and philosophy, along with practical living. You are reminded of the possibilities in creating personal change. So for an hour, we'll stimulate and expand the mind.
Shanti, 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 shanti. Sing the word. Let's do shanti, 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 shanti. It's time to wake up.
Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am Sonia Barrett, and happy Monday to you. And, of course, thanks to Donna Delori for our intro song, Be the Change. Well, I hope you had a great weekend, or at least a weekend that maybe something that you wanted to experience. Well, I tell you real quickly, over the weekend, I had to choose between mosquitoes and bees. This was actually yesterday. So basically, I get these welts when I get bitten by mosquitoes. I mean, they swell up. So I'm sitting in the backyard and I'm thinking, gosh, I'd really like to be here, but I started to get these little mosquito bites. So I thought I'll go put some lavender on. I think that'll work. Well, what I didn't realize is that the bees actually also like lavender. So while I wasn't going to get bitten anymore by mosquitoes, now I was being chased by bees. So anyway, so that was the thrill of it. Eventually, I just called it a day and went inside. But now I know. One loves the lavender, and the other one hates it. Anyway, today our guest is going to be Kilindi Iyi, and we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different things, but just to narrow it down, I just kind of said embedded simulations and the brain as technology and the interface to other realms, other potentialities. And that sort of picked up from the last time he was here. So anyway, before we connect with our guests today, I wanted to share with you just an excerpt from an article, which I really kind of feel that it may help you to shape your week, shape the outcome of your week. And this article is actually titled, How Language Shapes the Brain. So just a quick excerpt. And this is actually by Sayuri Hayakawa and Viorica Marianne, and this was written, I think, April 23rd of this year. So in quotes here, when Emperor Akihito stepped down from the chrysanthemum throne on May 1st, 2019, in Japan's first abdication in 200 years, Naruhito officially became the new emperor, ushering in a new era called Reiwa, which means harmony. Japan's tradition of naming eras reflects the ancient belief in the divine spirit of language. Kotodama, which means word spirit, is the idea that words have an almost magical power to alter physical reality. Through its pervasive impact on society, including its influence on superstition and social etiquette, traditional poetry, and modern pop songs, the word Korodama has, in a way, provided proof of its own concept. For centuries, many cultures have believed in the spiritual force of language. Over time, these ideas have extended from the realm of magic and mythology to become a topic of scientific investigation, ultimately leading to the discovery that language can indeed affect the physical world, for example, by altering our physiology. Our bodies evolve to adapt to our environments, not only over millions of years, but also over the days and years of an individual's life. For instance, off the coast of Thailand, there are children who can see like dolphins. Cultural and environmental factors have shaped how these sea nomads of the Moken tribe conduct their daily lives, allowing them to adjust their pupils underwater in a way that most of us cannot. Just as extensive diving can change our pupils and exercise can change our bodies, so can mental activity such as learning and using language, shape and physical structure of our brain. When two neurons respond to a stimulus, such as a word, they begin to form chemical and physical pathways to each other, which are strengthened or weakened depending on how often they are coactivated. This process of neurons that wire together, is the basis for all learning, and is reflected in the formation of gray matter, which is where neurons communicate with each other, and white matter, which is fatty tracks connecting gray matter regions. Okay, so I read that really quickly, but you get the idea, and I'm reminding you of this fact that it is a scientific fact, and I think most people out there could even agree to it, that words are extremely significant, and they have so much more power than we really pay attention to, and of course the momentum behind the words. But just to be, cognizant of what you're thinking, what you're saying, and how this is all shaping your every next moment and possibly your week. Let's not throw words around. Let's really just kind of start thinking more about it, because I tell you, the folks that run things, believe it or not, that's why language becomes so important, because they know how to use some of these words, and it becomes, in one way, yes, magical in terms of how it affects a whole environment of people. So shift your own world. If you can't shift the world that is being shaped by someone else, but at least think about how you're shaping your own world with your own inner language and your external vocalizing, anyway, of those words. So that's that. Now, as I said, we've got Kilindi Iyi on the show, and we want to get started because it moves really quickly when Kilindi is on. Just to give you a brief bio, I'm not going to go into the bigger picture of it, but Kilindi Iyi has been featured on local and national television programs such as 60 Minutes and Strange Universe. Kilindi was honored on the martial arts masters produced by Wesley Snipes as one of the masters of the martial arts in the 20th century. He is a mycologist and has presented on the subject of psilocybin as far north as Norway and as far south as Australia. And there's so much more to Kilindi, but we're going to bring Kilindi Iyi in so that those of you who haven't heard him before will now know how deep this goes in terms of speaking with Kilindi. Kilindi, welcome back to the Expansion Zone.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be back.
Always.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, good.
Good to have you back. Good. So, of course, there was so much that you covered the last time, and I'm thinking, okay, again, where do we start? And I thought maybe the kickoff, I'm going to say, is the idea of human beings transforming. And when I say that, I'm saying that from the perspective of change and everything that happens on our planet and in the cosmos, everything that actually happens to allow this natural progression of the evolution of human beings and really everything else, things that people just aren't paying attention to. So what do you think would be a good starting spot for us? We can talk about the planet, as you mentioned before. She's got her own agenda. We can talk about, the brain. I'm going to let you kind of pick the lead in based on all that we had talked about before the show.
Well, we can start right where you left off a couple of minutes ago with you were talking about basically neural hacking through language, being able to organize the brain in a certain way by the things that we talk to ourselves about, the things that we talk to others about, and our concepts. This helps us to move forward into new areas as language expands, our brain expands, and my I guess you say my area of inclusion in this is with the access point of hallucinogenic mushrooms. One thing that the tryptamine hallucinogens provides on certain levels is synesthesia, where you can actually see sounds and hear colors. So under the influence, the organizing molecule psilocybin inside of that will give you experiences that expand the consciousness, expand the human area of being able to move forward into the new paradigms of which we're shifting into very quickly, especially the new children that are coming that are on the next posed for the next level of being able to move into the transhumanistic areas of our lives, and then beyond into the singularity, which is a point of which we can't see over the horizon on what we are going to ultimately be. But we know that these things are happening and that we're moving beyond the regular three-dimensional five-sense reality of which we are embedded right now, through technology, through the areas of things like virtual reality, augmented reality, also through genetic manipulation with things like CRISPR, gene editing software, and things like that, that give the human the ability to be able to tweak ourselves in this new area of which we're now embedded, as I say, with things like 5G and technology, computers, supercomputers, things like that. I think Bitcoin moved to, I guess in the last few days, to 69 quintillion hash flows
Right.
per second. In other words, I think the number of the grains of sand that are on Earth are like 7 quintillion. I don't know who's sitting around counting grains of sand or who doesn't. Just
Somebody needs a different job.
Yeah, to find these things out. You made me lose my count again. I was at 14 quintillion. But this is the type of things and technologies that we're encountering. And then when we pair that with our transdimensional, extra-dimensional, ultra-dimensional access through the hallucinogens, through the psychedelics, through the entheogens, and for the first time, folks, I utilize those terms. I transfer between the three terms because I want to hit everybody. They created entheogen, the word entheogen to kind of distance these very profound compounds from what happened in the 1960s. So they started utilizing entheogen. Entheogen means to awaken the spirit within, awaken the knowledge within, or awaken the God within. And psychedelic means mind manifesting, to manifest mind. And hallucinogenic or hallucinogen means to wander, to hallucinate. So none of these things in those three terms are to be looked at as not real, because they're all real. Everything is real. There's no such thing as something that's not real. We're just hooked to a certain frequency, like on the radio. We're on, what's the call letters for your station?
We're stuck on a channel.
we're stuck on a channel, and sometimes we get out of that channel or get above to the higher frequencies on the radio, and then we get a chance to experience other channels that aren't playing the same music, doesn't have the same talk shows and things like this. So our reality is kind of tuned in, and that's good for the physical body, its continuation, because, you don't want to be riding down the street on a particular station, then the station spontaneously switch up, and your physical body is moving through time and space, and there's a clear road, but you see a mountain because you're on a different channel, or you're on the mountain and you see a clear road because you're on a different channel, and your physical body isn't going to have that. So a lot of things that we can share this afternoon are how we can move the mind, body, and spirit, and those technologies that have come from that, have come from our minds, have come from our bodies, have come from our spirits, the technologies that are inclusive in that, because the mind has produced technologies for the body, which, in different environments, clothing and things to keep us warm when we're cold or cool when we're hot. And the same thing happens on a higher level when we want to access the higher functions of the brain. In talking to ourselves and putting ourselves in different environments, it opens up epigenetic areas of the DNA that will manifest certain things because of the stresses that are put on our bodies by the environment encountering a new area or a old area of which we no longer are part of. Some folks have those fish genes that give them the ability to be able to stay in the water longer and to be able to have things like that. They produce the artificial blood cell that will allow human beings to, once they take one breath, the artificial blood cell is so efficient that they can stay underwater for several hours, And these are technologies that are taken from other technologies of what is possible for the human being. There are places, there's a place in Africa, I can't remember the name of the village right offhand. I'll try to remember it before we get off the program, where the fishermen show the power of fishermen. In other words, they show how they can call the different fish to the nets. They show how they can tell the sharks to go away. They can call the whales. They can go underwater from what would seem to be an impossible time. And this is all the power of which they are genetically encoded into because they are the fishermen. And it is the same with not just the physical realms, but also the multidimensional realms that are out here, that you go to your multidimensional home. And in doing that, you acquire the technologies and understanding of what is part of your whole genetic makeup. That's why even when you take certain psychedelics, if you have a genetic affinity to a particular psychedelic, a ancestral affinity to a particular psychedelic, you get a lot more mileage out of it. So in dealing with, our expansion, our growth into the new area of what, for lack of a better word, the new human, because in actuality, we won't be human any longer. I think this last generation of people will be the last generation of humans, because we have to look at, even when we look at people who are talking about different genders, and I think they have about 72 different genders. Pretty soon they'll be talking about different humanoid types, and different sexual areas will be not only artificially created, but also spontaneously start to evolve out of the human into the unimaginable. So, people are upset now because someone says that they're a different gender. Wait another 10 years when they're, folks no longer are trying to hide the tails or getting them cut off at birth if they're there, or with CRISPR expanding those things out, expanding certain areas of the human. So we'll be walking around in a looks like the bar in Star Wars, people with two heads and tails and reptilian skin and things like this. Because it's all part of the new areas of which we will be pressing out into. We now have psychedelic. We have what I can best call is psychedelic currency, which is Bitcoin. And that psychedelic currency is usable in all areas of the transdimensional realms. In other words, if you're in hyperspace through the ingestion of psilocybin mushrooms or iboga or one of the different areas of the psychedelics, you can buy and you can base your wealth on the same algorithms that Bitcoin is running on today. It's no different than Dr. Gates, who's a professor in supersymmetry. His calculations, he's found that our reality of which we exist runs on the same algorithm, the same computer code that Google and Facebook runs on. And Bitcoin in the multiverse, as far as family wealth or the wealth of great houses, is based upon the same exact algorithm that Bitcoin runs on, because we're talking numbers here that generate reality. We're talking numbers here.
Is numbers and codes.
Okay.
And this is the thing that I think people find challenging, because we're entering into this whole other area of computer language being introduced into our reality, which is not something that people were used to, because now we're looking at the technology of existence, of reality. And I know there's going to be some folks out there that are just not going to be happy with in some of what you said. Let me just say that right off the bat. There's going to be somebody that just goes, this is ridiculous stuff. What is he talking about? But I think one of the things, Kilindi, that I wanted to point out to people is that when you talk about hallucinogenics or hallucinating, is that, science, people are really, really into science. I mean, science really has realized that we are hallucinating life because of all the chemicals that are really, it's all the chemicals that we produce. We're a chemical factory, basically, and life is showing up for us based on that kind of science.
Life is a hallucination. We're in a hallucination as we speak. A very persistent hallucination.
Even Einstein said that.
Hallucination.
Even Einstein was very clear in saying that too, that it was a very persistent one. An illusion, however, a persistent one.
Well, yes, he and Niels Bohr talking about the basis of reality, and Einstein said, I'd like to think the moon was still there if I'm not observing it. And Niels Bohr said, well, I hate to burst your bubble, but once you're no longer observing the moon ceases to exist, because you create the moon when you observe it through consciousness, through the super computers that generate the reality of which we exist. I know people want to think that this is base reality and that we're the most important thing in all existence, everywhere in space and time, but we're not. But yet we are, because everything is just as valued as everything else, because it's all made out of the same substance, and that substance is numbers.
Yes, it's mathematics.
It's based on algorithms. It's based on supercomputers that exist below the plane from which the macro universe and universes is generated. It's just that the technology is so fast, it seems seamless. It creates solidity when there is no solidity. You know, physics will tell you that a stone wall or a mountain is nothing. It's not solid at all. It's empty space. But the computers are so fast that it generates what you call solidity. So that persistent hallucination that we exist in, you know, I know it's difficult for people to hang on to this, just like it is with, I use analogies of what we're in. It's like Bitcoin. I was looking at a guy selling gold on, he was having a gold seminar because he had ounces of gold, he had quarter ounces, he had gold dust, he had all these different things. He said, you can take this gold dust and you can put it in a jar and you can take it anywhere in the world if you want to take it. And I'm saying, and some guy chimed in and said, look, we got Bitcoin because Bitcoin is actually more valuable than gold. It is rarer than gold. Gold is plentiful, it's still being mined, and they've moved to where they're going to be mining gold off-world because gold, palladium, platinum, iridium, all of these different rare metals are contained in asteroids, and there are gajillions of tonnage of these rare metals in asteroids, of which the Japanese were just blowing up asteroids to see how, not blowing them up, but setting off charges in asteroids to see about recovering different exotic metals from these particular asteroids and comets and things like that.
Now, Kilindi, I know you're on a roll, but I'm going to have to definitely take our station break in just a moment, and to stick a pin in that, but also to make people aware. If you've never heard of synesthetes before, that's, you know, Kilindi mentioned something earlier about sound and I think color and sound, but these are people that can see things in words in letters in colors or sound, or, you know, it's just their brain has allowed them to have these experiences. So we'll throw in even that when we get back as well. But we're going to just take a quick station break, so just stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Vanessa Valdez, host of Transforming Consciousness, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. right here on KPFK. Join me each week as we learn from each other ways to awaken our consciousness for the greater good of all. That's Transforming Consciousness with me, Vanessa Valdez, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. right here on KPFK. Stay tuned.
And we are back. You are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am, of course, your host, Sonia. And my guest, who is Kilindi Iyi, and we are having a very interesting conversation. But let me also just remind you that we are coming to you from KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California, 98.7 in Santa Barbara, 93.7 in San Diego, 99.5 in Ridgecrest and China Lake, and streaming live at kpfk.org. And Kilindi, you were speaking about off-world mining. Off-world mining and the importance of bitcoins. We like tangible things, though. We like things that we can touch. And that starts to throw people off because value in our minds get lost when you can't touch something.
Yes. Well, older people like things that they can touch. Younger people like things that produce effects that are immediate. You know, it's like when you were a kid and you are an older person and you waited for the Wizard of Oz to come on. You wait a whole year. You know, the Wizard of Oz is coming on next week and things like that. Where now the children who are here now, if they want to watch the Wizard of Oz, all they have to do is click it on their phone or just get it off of Netflix or things like that. The older paradigm and the older mindset is fading away. You have Warren Buffett, who is like the second richest man in well, they never tell you really who are the richest people, the old money, but they'll tell you, Peter Thiel and people like this. But Warren Buffett, he doesn't get Bitcoin. He doesn't see it. He can't understand it. He knows stocks and derivatives and real estate and tangible things that you can hold in your hand. But young people aren't. They're just coming into the ages where they're starting to accumulate wealth and have wealth passed down to them, and they're not buying gold. They're not investing in these so-called tangible assets. They're starting to invest in cryptocurrency. They believe in the mathematics.
Right, which you can't run out when you're dealing with math. I always say you can't really run out, but that's a whole other story. When we understand mathematics and numbers, we realize that there's a great science involved here, which is why, yes, it's like going into the clouds. It's like going into the endless, and that's basically what this digital world, that kind of world, is allowing. Yeah, and
the thing is that most of the currency now is digital already. Most people aren't, when they go to Walmart, they're paying with their Visa, MasterCard, they're paying with PayPal or whatever they're paying with. It usually isn't cash. You have some diehards and holdouts, like my father, who just, he just stopped arguing with a message machine or a robot call, because he couldn't understand the concept that the phone, that there's not a real human being on the other side talking to you, that there's a robot or artificial intelligence on the other side of the line, So as the older people die out, those old concepts of, well, I know that gold is real and I can stick it in my, yes, but you can't pass gold, from anywhere on earth immediately for, for a penny, or for the equivalent of what you would call a penny. You can't do that. Gold is you got to move it physically. You got to, if you want to see, if I wanted to send it to my cousin in Spain, I have to go through a lot of rigmarole to send him an ounce of gold with a Bitcoin. All I have to do is pick up my phone and press send, and he's got it automatically, something that he can use as a means of buying goods, services, and commodities immediately. He can be in the store in line with two people in front, and I can send him the value of whatever's in his basket immediately. I can't do that with gold, And without permission, I can't do that with dollars or yen or euros or any of those things, because there's a permission. There's a human being in between the transfer and, what you're trying to do. I can even go to the ATM and get more than $400 out.
Right, there are limitations. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, there are limitations.
Bouncing back to center stage there, where people can hear colors and be able to, with sound, see it. It's kind of like the young boy. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think they had a documentary. You can definitely get him on YouTube. He's passed away now, but the young boy who had kind of like his own sonar. He was blind from
right.
birth,
mm-hmm.
and he used clicks. He used clicks to be able to locate with sound and to be able to see things with sound. Whereas, people thought this was impossible, but he'd get on his bike and he'd ride all around town and stop at the corners and not get run over by cars and things like that.
I remember seeing it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he'd go up and down the stairs. So there's so many things that we can do that we just haven't tapped into, because the language of things has helped in the limitation of, it's another part of governing, It's just like even writing, spelling. Spelling is a spell. It's magic, because you're physicalizing the speech.
Right, you're casting spells.
That speech. Yes, you're casting spells. The sigils and geometric symbols and things like that are all part of the language of our existence, communicating with the mathematics of what generates reality. And as we change and start utilizing our language to help to change what we are, in other words, things like impossible, things like, well, you can't get out of here alive, everybody's got to die. That is, everybody's got to die because everybody says and have been saying for the last 2 million years, well, you got to die, everybody's got to die. So that's part of the mindset of when they switched off those immortality genes, they left a spell or a message on top of it that you have to die. So we fulfilled that promise by everybody saying that you have to die. Now, dying, of course, is just the next phase of life. And when we say immortality genes, we're not talking about a trillion years because that is inside of the death tolls. But the mayfly existence of what we have as human beings, 70 years, 70 years, 60 years.
So there's all kinds of transformations.
It's all imposed. That's all imposed upon us by our language,
right? And
us fulfilling the prophecy of that. And that's why they talk about in the golden ages or a long time ago. So and so lived 600 years and Methuselah lived 700. But if we go into those areas before the Younger Dryas is right after the last ice age. They plunged back into coal for 1,300 years. Prior to that, before the sinking of Atlantis, when we were more inclusive in the earlier technologies, they said that the demigods or that the gods who came, and of course we're talking about gods. We're talking about long-lived humanoids who had a higher level of technology. They were living 30,000 years and 50,000 years. We have it from the Sumerian records. We have it from the Kemetic records, that these older systems, people were living a lot longer because they didn't have the same encoded limitations imposed upon the consciousness of the morphogenetic field of which we're inside of. The morphogenetic field is the field of form, the field of form. In other words, human beings set up an energy. Lions set up an energy that affects all lions. That energy affects humans also, and everything else that exists. They set up fields of energy of which they are included in that either expands what they're doing or limits what they're doing because these things are contained in the morphogenetic field.
Right. And human beings have limited themselves to a singular realm concept. So I think I'm just pointing that out. I know you did point that out in several ways, but it's really to remind people that that's what's happened. It's this singular interpretation of time and space, or or reality or realm. Not realizing that we have access to other potential spaces of experience.
Well, most definitely. Some governors at a point of infancy is good, because we're in a infancy type of situation as the human. The human, it's kind of like Earthling. You're an Earthling. You're a person who is a very, very new child in an environment of which is imposed upon them by their own limitations. So when you start to mature, you start out in your own neighborhood, you start out in your own house, and then then eventually it's okay. You can go outside in the front, but don't go in the street. Then the next thing you're doing, you're playing in the street. Then the next time you're going to school. Then you're going to high school, which is farther away. Then you go off to college. You're by yourself. Then you're traveling around the world. It's the same thing with our consciousness and the human. We're moving out of kindergarten and we're moving into junior high school and things like that. So the perimeters, the perimeters change, you know.
And it's difficult for...
We can be part, yes.
It's very difficult for, again, you said, maybe it's the older folks, but there's such difficulty is what I've seen in entertaining any of these concepts simply because it either goes completely against religious doctrines or it's just so completely unbelievable that it can't even be entertained. That's always fascinating to me. I mean, I just did a show on that, I think, was it last week? Just trying to understand when people become so stuck on a belief that was actually handed to them by somebody else anyway, but they're fighting to hold on to it. It's, you know.
That's part of, yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the control system that imposes that people not go too far, you know, because certain areas are set up because people are afraid, and then they impose those fears on others so that we want to keep everybody in the house. It's no different than a mother who has small children who wants to keep them in the house, and the mother doesn't know what she wants to do, or the father doesn't know what they want to do. They just want to protect their children because they've assumed responsibility for their development.
Keep them safe.
So, so religions have done the same thing. You know, you are my children. You are my little lambs. You know, I want to keep you safe. That type of thing.
And it's like safe from what?
You know,
safe from knowing, experiencing.
Corruption seeps in. And it becomes power, and it becomes a feel-good. It becomes a way of being able to have a great life yourself. You know, I mean, I was just in the Vatican a few months ago, and the opulence and the power of this small little place is, you know, it's a powerful place, and people don't want to give up that type of power to give people the ability to say, you know, I can walk this walk without this type of imposition on my mind and on my spirit, that I can walk this myself. They want to keep, that's like I said, earthly, children, young. So, you know, it's time to break out of that as a society, because there are people that have broken that program a long time ago.
Oh, we have no idea.
As far as the generalized public, people are jumping out of those things like 40 going north. It's not being said because they keep the vision, they keep the illusion before people with the mega churches and constantly, Islam in the forefront and all these different types of things. People are leaving these things left and right because they're no longer just going to believe because their mother and their grandmother believed. And that's mainly the reason why, is because they caught you in diapers and said, this is what it is, this is God, and you solidified it in your mind. Some people get away early. Others never get away. But the thing is that generally in populations, they're moving away from these things. They're moving more towards direct experience, and that's what the psychedelics give you. That's what mushrooms give you, direct experience without the middleman in between. And that's why, making an analogy back again to Bitcoin, since it's permissionless and that it has no middleman in it, it's peer-to-peer, you to I, me to you, it goes direct. It doesn't go through the clearinghouse of Visa. It doesn't go through the bank. It doesn't go through whatever middleman is there to take their cut. And it's the same thing with how we view these ancient spiritual systems that have helped with the limiting vision that there's always something greater, that there's always something worth more, that you're just a lowly peon in the midst of the universe. No, as I said before, nothing is more important than anything else, which makes everything important. So there's no greater anything out there than you, but you're not greater than anything out there. You're no more significant than a grain of sand in the Sahara. You're no more significant than a pile of shit in Bangladesh. Because we're all made out of the same code. Consciousness.
Kilindi, you just said the no word on air.
Oh, excuse me. Do.
I had to make sure I pointed it out, just in case somebody out there is offended, including the FCC. But anyway, go ahead.
That's just the only real cuss word is damn, and that's the one that's used less. That was just basically the Anglos and the Saxons. You always demonize, those who you defeat their language. And
code words.
That's that word again, but shite, in English, that's just the way of defecation. But where was I? Oh yeah, okay. So moving on from Bangladesh, so we're moving into a very, very brave and strange new world with artificial intelligence, with the not actually the enlargement of the brain, but in actuality the shrinking of the brain, but the extension of the brain. In other words, my brain is extended by Google search, whereas 40 years ago, if I wanted to find something out and I didn't know it, I could call somebody up and they probably wouldn't know it either. So I had to go to the library, go into the stacks, utilize the Dewey Decimal System, spend an afternoon in the library to find what I wanted to get. So books were the technology that expanded our knowledge, but it had a slow rate of access. Now that we have Google, the same information is available, but it is available almost instantaneously. So, cyborg, we're all actually cyborgs. The technology just isn't embedded inside of the cellular structure, or that technology isn't embedded in the cloud where we can access it without being able to have it embedded in our bodies or minds or cellular structure.
Now, Kilindi,
we're all cyborgs.
We're going to take another quick break before we go. I have to make sure that we get our next break in. It's very easy for the time to just roll on by. So please stay tuned, and we will be right back after this brief message.
You want to make positive change in your community. KPFK has a program just for you. Join me, Jeff LeBeau, and our guests on Changemakers, Wednesdays at 2 p.m., where we'll talk with grassroots activists organizing to better their communities. We'll explore what they're doing and how they did it. Please listen in to Changemakers Wednesday afternoons on KPFK.
And we are back. You are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am Sonia Barrett, and my guest today is Kilindi Iyi. And, of course, we're coming to you from 90.7 FM. It's KPFK. All right. So, Kilindi, before we go running out of time, I wanted to kind of tie all of this in, the digital aspect, everything that you're saying in the sense of human beings, human evolution. You said quite a few things around the expansion of human beings and what we are unfolding into. And I know we're sort of programmed for third parties, but when you talk about Bitcoin and all of that digital aspect, you're talking about the fact that it's, direct. You're cutting out the middlemen. So in terms of human beings, what's the correlation that you're making in the sense of a human being expanding into more limitless possibilities of ourselves as individuals or just collectively?
Well, it's the kind of like the hero's journey, where the journey of the alone into the alone. Well, we're all ultimately alone in the multiverse, and we're trying to figure out what we are, where we come from, and ultimately where we're going. And certain areas of knowledge have been made available to us over time. And as things like Bitcoin that show successful ways of inclusion, as I said, the same, making the analogy of the same codes that generate reality are the same codes that we're utilizing in our daily lives when we use Facebook and Google and things like that. He said that they're not like the codes of Google and Facebook. They're exactly the same. Block linear correction codes that are used for the search engines are the same as reality, and it's the same as with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only true money that has ever been on Earth, and people aren't understanding it, So there are certain limiting governors that are placed upon infantile human beings with incredible power. And as we're moving out of that infantile stage, we're given more and more access to those things that are adult things. It's kind of like, let's see, back in the 1950s, there was a movie called Forbidden Planet, and it was a starship, C-57D, and it went to a distant planet, Altair, where Professor Morpheus, he expanded his mind by utilizing a Krell machine. The Krell were the people who were no longer there. They built the technology. They built the machine to be able to create matter out of thought. And the Krell destroyed themselves because once they created this machine that gave them the power to be able to create matter out of thought, they destroyed themselves because they couldn't control their thought. I wish that person would drop dead, and the person dropped dead. Oh, okay, the inner id, or the inner ghost and the darkness of people's consciousness became manifest, and everybody's manifesting at the same time. That's why, things move slowly, that you have a small group that starts to break away. Then they have children, and those children start to breach the human, and their children move past the human altogether into something else. Because if you just dropped it straight in the middle of everybody and gave everybody the power of what they would call the God power, we destroy each other. The world would be around for about 90 seconds because it's supposed to destroy everything. So these type of analogies inside of movies and entertainment are key bits of information on where we're going and moving to.
And that's happening for a reason.
We're moving to the secret.
Right.
Yes. We're moving to the Superman, the Superwoman. This is what we're moving to.
Right, which is why it's coming up so much. Which I've been saying that's the reason why we're seeing it, because these are all natural progressions: telekinesis, telepathy, teleportation. It's just all a natural part of what a human being really is capable of doing, when we are properly turned on, when our brains are properly activated, accessed. Before we also, before the show ends up running out of time, I wanted to make sure that I do throw this in. This is something that I wanted to throw in, and I completely forgot at the very beginning. Speaking of superconsciousness, that I will actually be in Seattle July 11th and 13th to do a talk and a workshop, and the title is Upgrade Your Perception of Reality and Live Beyond a Default Existence. And this is going to be held at East West Bookshop that's sponsoring my appearance there. And you can find out more about that by going to therealsoniabarrett.com. So it's therealsoniabarrett.com. So if you're listening, you're in Seattle, please do that. Now, Kilindi, I want to make sure, is there anything that you would like to also add, any events that you may have coming up that people need to know about?
Well, not too much anymore this year. We leave for Oaxaca this week for the Food of the Gods retreat. That's all closed up now, where we'll be in the mountains of Mexico with the Food of the Gods at the Aztec ruins. So sorry you all missed that this year, but we will be next year going to South Africa to deal with the Zulu mushrooms, and also the Detroit Psychedelic Conference is coming up next year in August. So start gearing up for that, where we'll have some dynamic speakers and people of interest sharing their knowledge to the community. So,
and how can people keep up with? How can people stay abreast of what's going on? Any of this information, so they don't miss it next year.
Well,
is it Facebook? Is it social media?
I hope to be on the show to be able to share with the audience sometime when we get a little bit closer next year.
Yeah, well, you just got to remind me.
Yes, you can get me on Facebook and also on Instagram, Kilindi Iyi. I don't have any handles of the Grand Wazoo or anything like that. Just Kilindi Iyi, Kilindi, last name Iyyi. And you can get me on Facebook and also on Instagram. So that's pretty much where you can get me. I let a lot of the other things go because I think streamlined life helps you to move quicker and more fluid within cyberspace.
Now, so in about a minute or so, can you throw out anything that you think would sort of pull this all together for somebody who's kind of listening and, I don't know, is just sitting there going, okay, what next for myself?
What next?
What next?
Get points of access, be able to explore your consciousness, be able to explore different dimensions, things that you would have thought were impossible. Don't limit yourself. This is a brave new world, as Aldous Huxley said in this book. It's time to expand. Don't limit yourself by the old paradigm.
There's the music.
The old lanes.
There's the music, Kilindi. Well, thank you so much, Kilindi, for being on the show again. It's always a pleasure. And thanks to the listening audience. And I know you got a lot to think about and talk about. Thanks to our engineer as well. And, of course, visit theexpansionzone.com to listen to the archive and so much more. And visit my website to find out more, therealsoniabarrett.com, of everything that's coming up, where I'm going to be. And, of course, as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything, which is what we do. Until next time, see you then.